Hey, so this video is going to be a bit more of an advice video. And the thing is, I see a lot of devs ask the question, like, how can I become, better? And I'm not gonna lie, it's kind of one of those things that's kind of like a secret menu at McDonald's, like no one knows about. Like, there's not that many resources or guidance out there on how to actually get better at programming. You can find a whole bunch of tutorials, but there's not actually a guide in terms of like, yo, how can I actually, become a better developer and steps and an action plan. So you kind of just stuck around looking for advanced or intermediate tutorials, and these will help with your knowledge, but you got to take a look at yourself. And the question is this really making me a better programmer just by following tutorials? And in this video, we're going to discuss things that you can do to become a better programmer and actions that you can take. Also, if you have your own views, I'd love to hear your tips too in terms of like what you think you can do to become a better programmer in the comment section below too. So let me know. And without further ado, let's get into this video. So I'll be real. When we get a problem, it's quite common for you to just dive straight in and try to fix it. Like, I've got to fix it now. Like, I've got to do it now. And personally, this is not a good idea at all. Now, you might be wondering why, because I have to fix the issue. Well, let's look at using a real world example. When you go to a restaurant, you don't just immediately just pick up the menu and just pick the first thing on the menu that you see, right? Probably not. And if you do, well, you also do like to live life on the edge, because you're not looking at your options, man. But anyways, you normally look at all of your options before making a decision. And the same thing applies to building software. You don't just dive in and start writing code. Like, that's not realistic. Like, you need a plan. And to be honest with you, you're title my programmer, but you're not a programmer, you're a problem solver. And before the 10x developers escort me out of the iOS community, what I mean is that you should be researching the best way to tackle your problem and creating a plan on how you'll tackle this problem and then execute it. Because that's literally what our jobs are, is research and implementation. Like, we're just basically just Googling, planning out a problem, implementing that fix for that problem. So it's all good and well me saying this, but you know me, I like a good metaphor as well. So let's say you're working on an app and you need to store your favorite contacts, which I do cover in my free, core data course in Swift UI that you can check out on my channel. But that if you're American, that sounded like a proper American TV advert, man. Like, but yeah. But let's get back on point. Let's say you had to store your contact somewhere. Some questions you want to ask yourself is, do I need to store big or small data? Do I need to perform queries on the data to fetch it? Does it need to be synced to the cloud, or can it just be like data that I store locally? Do I need it to be lightweight in size? How does this handle, security, this database? These are just a few questions you can ask yourself, but essentially you're getting your requirements and figuring out the best path for you to go down, which rolls nicely into my next point, which is going, behind the scenes. So a lot of the times us developers can just think, okay, I need to fetch data and display it on the screen. Jobs are good and I'm done. And whilst that is valid, it's actually important to know what's going on behind the scenes, because what I mean by this is that if you're working with an API, is it using JSON or GraphQL? What persistent storage are you using? Does the service have any additional costs or limit? Are there any limits with the service that you're using? Is there any caching to help with performance? You kind of need to step outside the box and see what the service you're using provides, and does this meet your software needs? And also, does it meet your company's costs or your costs? Blindly just choosing one because it gives you data is never a good idea, since you may keep on developing and then at a certain point, have a limitation or a block in the future that, makes you have to switch to another provider. So you could have saved all that time if you just did a bit more research. But to be honest, this falls back onto my other point about research. You need to check and make sure that everything you're doing is the best and optimal way with the right API for your use case, rather than just picking something random. And as much as you want to research and find information, you need to dive into the deep end and you need to question everything. I always say to juniors that I work with that if you're not asking me a question, I'm worried. And what I'm thinking is that, like, damn, okay, I hired a senior, but he's in a junior role. And the reason why I say that is because, I want you to ask me questions so I can give you that information to help build up your knowledge. But essentially, you want to know everything. Like, never assume. Like, there's a saying in football, I'm not talking about American football, I'm talking about the real football. But it's a saying in football that if a defender has to put a diving tackle in, he's already made a mistake. And the same applies with assumptions. Once you go ahead with an assumption, you've made a mistake. And I know people can be brutal, but honestly, if you ask someone a question and they make you feel small, that person's a turd, man. I'll just be real with you, man. That person is a turd. And you want to make sure that you can soak up as much information as possible before you do any kind of work, since this will help make sure that you have a clear plan and cover all edge cases that could possibly appear. Now, I know that I do tutorials and, you know, I show you how to build things, but honestly, it's super important to be able to read documentation. So you need to know what you're working with and on. And in terms of what you're actually able to do with that API, if you just rely purely on tutorials, one day you will hit a wall where you can't find what it is that you're looking for because there isn't a tutorial for it. And you've not built up the skill to be able to research and find in the documentation that API, what it's capable of doing. It's important to know how to read and navigate documentation to find out the information that you need. And it might sound crazy, but navigating documentation is hard, man. Like, it's not easy, it's daunting. Like, having a book full of 100 pages of how to use something isn't, straightforward. It can be daunting, but literally this document is a manual telling you what it is that you can do and how you can use something. So even with my videos, when I talk about something or show you something new, get into the habit of going to the documentation to find it and read up more about it in terms of what that API offers so you can understand more about it. This little thing that I just suggested will actually help build up your confidence in terms of navigating documentation and being able to find what it is that you need and implement it. Just like I said, read, read, read. The same thing applies to test, test, test. And you'll see a lot of people on Twitter say that, testing isn't important. And I'll be honest with you, when you go into a company and you work in a company, like, tests are super important because they allow us to basically find flaws and validate our code and save us time and costs and whatnot. And by testing, I don't mean doing manual tests on your phone because that takes up a lot of time. I mean writing actual unit, UI, or integration tests. And I actually have a course on my channel that goes through this that actually lets you know, how to write these. I'll leave it on the screen here. But tests actually have a few purposes. And one of them is that it actually helps you remember what it is you're doing. Because let's be honest, how many times have you wrote code, came back to it, and then question, were you high when you wrote this? Because you're like, bro, what was I writing here, man? And it's a great source of documentation because you're literally writing a test to tell you what it is that this piece of code should be doing. So when you look at a test, this is what I was writing the code for. So highly recommend that. But another main reason is that it actually exposes your code. And what I mean by this is that, let's say you do a manual test and, not only is doing manual test time consuming, but it's super easy when you're doing a manual test to miss a case path or an edge case. And it also doesn't help you see how your code doesn't separate your concerns. Now, if you're looking at me like, separate who? What I mean by this is that it doesn't show you how your code is tied directly, since you may be in a scenario where you can't easily just swap things in and out, and it makes it harder for you to actually write your tests. And tests help you see how your code is structured and if it makes sense. So what I mean by that is that, should this object rely on another object? How can I pass through dependencies? Do I really need to expose access within that object? Are all questions that you find when you're writing tests and more. Make sure that you write tests to see better ways to improve your code. Now, the saying is true, man.
See, as you can see, the more you fuck around, the more you're going to find out.
But honestly, the more you do fuck around, the more you do find out. And to be honest with you, a lot of people are scared of failing. And to be honest with you, it's something that you should embrace, man, because we only learn by messing up. And I've made a lot of mistakes in my career. Like, if you meet me in person or you want to chat to me, like, I can tell you a lot of times I've messed up, right? Like, and it's fine because in my role, I've managed to work my way up to a lead position and I've made mistakes. So it's fine to make mistakes. And I don't think I would be where I was now if I didn't use those mistakes as a stepping stone. And this is a short point, but it's actually okay to fail and struggle and not know what is going on. Like, it's actually better to say I don't know than for you to pretend that you do know. Like, just be honest and, mess up, it's fine. And this is actually part of the journey. If your path is a straight line and linear, in terms of your career, and you've never had any mistakes or any mess ups, let me know so I can download that starter pack as well, because I need it in my life. But you gotta have days where you're like, yo, do I really want to do this? Like, this is long. Like, I don't know how to resolve this problem. I don't know about this API, but that's fine. Like, because you're going to fix that problem and get to the bottom of it just by like breaking it down and asking for support, asking for help, and it's character building. You also gotta have days as well where you feel like you could run for either president or prime minister because you solved a really complex problem. All that matters is that you do something new at least once a day to help you get better. So like I said before, if you have if you have some advice that I've maybe not covered in this video, I'd love to hear it in the comment section below. And if you enjoy these type of like advice videos, I'd love to hear other topics that you'd like me to talk about as well. I do have a list, but I'd like to hear what you want me to talk about too. So if you enjoy my teaching style or discussion style, I actually do have courses on my website that you can check out. Also, as well, if you want to as well, you can actually donate to me. And I actually do have a, YouTube donate that you can actually donate to on the screen that you see on the screen here. Or you could buy me a coffee and the links are in the description box. I do have a YouTube membership if you want to be a ride or die and help support the cause, man. So you can, so I can keep on making videos like this. And you also get some cool badges as well, so I can actually see who you are with these cool badges, man. So you can actually check that out. Now, if you don't want to support me with any monetary value, that is perfectly fine. But what you can do to help, support the channel for free is basically like the video, subscribe, comment, and hit the notification bell to get updates for whenever I release a new video, as well as share it with your friends if you find this could be useful for anyone else. Now, I just want to say thank you to all my YouTube members who have been supporting me. I really do appreciate the support, and I see all your ride or dies, and thank you again. I hope you enjoyed this video. That's everything from me. I'll catch you in a bit. Deuces.